he's one of the fastest people to ever get his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's held world title belts in multiple weight classes, especially when he was in his prime. So, and money played a huge factor in that. And I know a lot of other people whose parents either run the gym or they make, or their parents have a lot of money, so they're able to train more. So, I definitely feel like it plays a huge part. One of the things that I don't know if you know anything about, but really fascinates me at this moment in political history is the concept of universal basic income. I don't know if you do you know what that is? I don't. So I'm a little surprised because you're friends with Cooper, because Cooper actually turned me on to this. But there's one of the candidates running for the Democratic nomination is a guy named Andrew Yang. And he's a business guy, and he's big into this thing. He calls it the freedom dividend because it tested better with his when they ran sort of consumer panels. But the idea is every American adult over 18 would get $1,000 a month, just free and clear. And he'll talk about how it sounds so revolutionary, but really Thomas Paine was talking about it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King was big into it. And the general idea is that it would allow people to pursue things they otherwise wouldn't. So with $1,000 a month, free and clear, a stay-at-home mom like my wife, a musician and film guy like our mutual buddy Cooper, someone like you, this came to mind right away. Long before I knew you were coming on, he and I talked about you coming on. I thought, I'm definitely going to ask this guy about UBI, because I think it really feeds in here. So I know you haven't heard about it much. I'm sort of throwing it at you quick, but what would $1,000 extra a month do as a professional athlete? Like, how helpful would that be? I honestly don't think it would be very helpful. If anything, I think it would be detrimental. Be detrimental to you as an athlete to have more money? Well, if you think about it, if this money's being given to you, one, and everybody knows that you're going to get it every month, scot-free, I assume everything else, the price is going to rise. They're going to know you're going to have this money, so they're going to raise the price. And also, if you know you're going to get this money, it's just going to given to you, you're not going to want to work as hard. You're not going to, you're going to relax a little bit when really you need to just stay on that grind. You need to keep putting the work in. Some of my best performances, some of my best training, some of my best mindsets have been when I've had nothing. Some of the people that I've found to help me out the most, like a couple of my coaches that I have today, took me in when I had nothing. And if I had something, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at. And so, that's just kind of how I feel about it. And I feel like respect. Not the answer I was expecting. Respect. I don't really like anything being given. It's just how I raise. I like everything being earned, or to show that you're at least working for it. And I feel like if you're just sitting on a couch and somebody gives you $1,000, you're not really. It's not deserving, and it's not going to feel as good to have that money. This is the point of the show, right? So an answer I wasn't expecting, but dude, I could spend the next hour talking this, but I won't. I think everything you just said is one of the considerations that you have to think about. And my guess is that now you and Cooper will be talking about this offline. But I think you have to think about that. However, I would recommend a movie to you called Whiplash. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So J.K. Simmons, who is an incredible actor, won an Academy Award for this movie, and it's at this music school. And the idea, you know who Charlie Parker was? Yeah. So he tells this story several times in the movie that when Charlie Parker went to his first rehearsal with this band, he didn't know all of his scales, and they threw a cymbal at him. They were so mad at him, and he went home and he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and they drove him so hard, but he became one of the most brilliant jazz musicians in history, right? Oh, right. So then later in the movie, so this J.K. Simmons character, this teacher, he's super hard on people. You even hear about a kid kills himself. He's so hard on him. But later in the movie, the main actor says to him, but don't you think if you push somebody so hard that they won't become this great thing? And J.K. Simmons goes, no, because that's the point. You can't
you can't chase away somebody who's great at something by being hard on them.
You can't reach your true potential until you get outside of your comfort zone.
So I think that as I think about the idea of UBI, which I think is so fascinating, something I never even heard of until Cooper told me to listen to Yang on Rogan, and now I've like binge watched Yang stuff. And it is that there definitely are going to be some people, they're going to sit on the couch and do nothing. But I think there are a lot of people, like I think Cooper is an example. I think you're an example. I don't think you would take that money and just be like, well, now I'm not going to fight. Now I'm just going to whatever. First of all, it's not enough money to support you, but it might let you not have that part-time job if you didn't want it. Like, I mean, Cooper might be able to not take some of the smaller video gigs, as an example. So I don't know. Like, I just thought it would be interesting to ask a professional athlete who's trying to get there.
The things I could do with $1,000 a month. Cooper's known me for a long time, and he's seen me live off of $500 a month. He's seen me live off of strictly BioLife donations. So
those are rough times, but
I think that
it's still rough times.
Anyway, rather than chase this rabbit anymore, like I totally hear what you said, but I think in someone in your position, it could be really interesting. So now we know that Keegan is not voting for Andrew Yang, but that's okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the money thing, and if you don't want to talk about this, like I totally am not going to make you talk about this, but I think is interesting is the idea of unions in MMA. It's actually one of the things that you're going to think I'm like stumping for Yang here, which I'm not. It's actually one of the things that Yang talks about is the UFC and unions. And just like any union story, whenever unions come up, Dana White is really quick to shut it down immediately. Just like car manufacturers did, just like anyone who's been unionized did. But the idea is sort of, when I read about it or hear people talk about it, is that, like you just said, even in the UFC where they're making all this money, the fighters, the actual performers, are not getting paid as much. They've got to rely on sponsors, and then the UFC did the whole thing with the sponsorships and the Reebok thing, and then the social media presence. I mean, would you be in favor of, if there were an MMA union, would you join it? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one. I mean, as an MMA fighter, especially the different tiers and the different levels there are, you're considered a prize fighter. So do I think all fighters should get paid the same? No. Do I think all fighters should get paid more? Yes. Mm-hmm. But, there's definitely, when it comes to like marketing aspect, it's like they're not going to pay somebody who their first fight in the UFC, which they usually give you it's like 10 and 10, so 10 to show up, 10 to win, or something like that, where they're not going to pay you like you're the main event, like you're Conor McGregor or Dustin Poirier or Tony Ferguson. They're not going to pay you millions of dollars to fight when it's your first fight. So yeah, do I think everybody should get paid more than $10,000 to show up and $10,000 to win for a lower level? But I do think that there should be different different tiers. And as far as the sponsorship. It looked really bad because you don't get as much you can't show your sponsors as much like individual attention like on your shorts and stuff when it comes to the UFC, but I still can. Mm-hmm. But I have a couple of buddies that are in the UFC, and they, Reebok pays you in sponsorship based off how many fights you have.
Okay.
As far as like that's what I've kind of gathered from them. So if you have 20 fights, you're going to get paid more than somebody who has 10 fights from Reebok. Okay. And you can still have your other outside sponsors and endorsements and stuff. You just not while you're in the ring.
Right.
So it's not a huge thing. But I mean, for a fighter union, I don't necessarily know how I stand.
Yeah.
On something like that.
I think that's a fair answer. The other thing that I would say is that if you've never been involved with a union before, so I totally heard what you just said about people getting paid the same. So in my youth, when I was closer to your age, I was in the actors union. And so definitely if you're Hugh Jackman and you're doing a play on Broadway, you're going to make more than a nobody doing a play on Broadway. But what they do is they set minimums. So there's a minimum you can make. And then I don't know a ton about it, but like if you're in the electricians union, it's what you're talking about. The journeyman electrician who's at the lowest level, there's a minimum, but then as you have more experience and more time and more so forth, it goes up from there. And then your value goes up. So if you are Anderson Silva, and in your first fight you destroy Chris Lieben, and you immediately get a title shot, and you become this phenom, you're going to rise in that quicker. They can always pay you more, but there are certain things. And then when you're in most unions, they then require other things that are sort of like niceties. So this is a lot of years ago, man. But when I was in the actors union, there was an amount of money, but then also there was a health insurance requirement. They had to give you breaks. So like after you couldn't work you for a number of hours without at least a little bit of a break. So there's a couple of things, but there's a trade-off then, because if there's a union and if you're in the union, there's a non-union show. So let's say you were in the union and the only organization that hired union was Bellator and UFC. And King of the Cage calls you and goes, "We want you to fight for the lightweight title." But you're in the union, you can't do that, because if you cross the line and work non-union, you're a scab and you can lose all your union stuff. Now you can't fight in the UFC. So it's a double edge of that sword. But I was curious if in the community, if you guys ever talk about that, or if you had any thoughts. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've known anybody who's talked about it or considered it. I mean, it's just kind of like in the fight business, you're either a prize fighter or you're not. You can either sell tickets, you have a lot of fans, or you don't. It just, I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, you know what you're going to make going in. You know, if you make weight, you're going to, if you make weight, you're going to get, $10,000 or whatever that is. If you lose, you're not going to get that other 10. But if you win, you get that other 10. So you kind of know, what you're going in. It's in the contract. If you show up overweight, you're going to be fined 20% of your purse. It's, and it's not like you're working every single day. Yeah, you're training every single day, but it's not like you're working in harsh conditions like most people that are in unions join a union for. So it's a little different, but it's that you just you gotta just make it your own and see as you go. Like I'm still young, and especially in this fight game, there's people who've been fighting for years, and I think I've only been fighting for like 2 or 3 years total as an amateur and a pro.
You have a very practical mind. I have to say, I like you more and more as the conversation goes along, because you're very matter of fact. Like, I don't want something that I didn't earn. Like, I'm open to the idea of this, but I don't know. Your generation gets bashed a lot for being entitled. You are like the least entitled. What are you, 25, 24?
I turned 25 in December.
So you are one of the least entitled 24-year-olds I've ever met. And that's awesome, man. Like, I love having conversations like this.